All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's policy session of the Phoenix City Council for November 15, 2016. We have the bare minimum for a quorum, but that's enough to get the business of the city done. So we'll proceed with today's meeting. We'll begin today with to turn to my fellow members of the City Council to see if they have any council information and/or follow-up requests. Does any member of this council have any information or follow-up requests? Councilwoman Deborah Stark.
Thank you, Mayor. On November 5th, I had the pleasure of dedicating a new sign for Shadow Mountain Senior Center. When I was first appointed to the council and held my first coffee, several of the seniors that attend that center said they did not have a sign and they wanted one. So luckily, I got a sign company to donate the sign and install it. And we dedicated it last a couple Saturdays ago. I want to give a real huge thanks to Pearson Signs for donating the sign and installing it. Pearson Signs is a third-generation local sign company. It was a pleasure working with them. On November 17th, we will be hosting our coffee chat at Black Rock Gym, which is located at 10436 North 32nd Street, and we're going to focus on street transportation issues at the coffee. And then on the 19th, we're going to be doing a ribbon cutting at Christie Cove Park for the newly installed playground equipment. And then December 8th, we'll be having our D3 chat with the new chief, Chief Williams, at 6 p.m. at Sunny Slope Community Center. And lastly, I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And as the holidays begin, remember to shop in Phoenix.
What was that last line?
Shop in Phoenix.
Thank you very much. All right, thanks. It's worth repeating. All right, Councilman Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to start off with an inquiry, something I'd like the city to really help me resolve at 35th Avenue and Dunlap. In the last month, we have had 2 families legally in crosswalks run over. And there has to be, we just redid that intersection thinking it was going to become safer, and that is not the case. So I would like streets to really investigate and see if there isn't some type of warning we can install, whether it's bumps in the street or something, to slow these traffic down and make them aware that red lights mean stop. So I appreciate that. I have some other announcements. We have a new dog park opening at the Deer Valley Park. I want to thank you to the Parks Department for making this a priority. And I also want to thank the Deer Valley Block Watch Association, who took some of their grant money and went out and put up the dog park signs and the little stations with the plastic bags. That was very thoughtful and generous of them to do that. I was fortunate and to attend the GAIN events. We had 2 big ones. Phoenician Palms did an excellent job at Cortez Park. And again, the Deer Valley Block Watch Association and Deer Valley Park also had a very successful event. I was honored to be the guest speaker at the Phoenix Women in Leadership, where I bared my soul and told them my secrets. And they're still laughing at me. So
Wait a minute, you told the secrets?
I did.
Oh, no.
The secrets on how to get around men, so. And it was well attended by the women, and they did an excellent job. They had a forum with the 2 chiefs, also saying how they went through the career path and made it to become top in their field. So it's very enlightening and rewarding for all of us. And last Saturday night, I happened to bump into Santa Claus. We were lighting the tallest tree in Arizona at the Anthem Outlets. So again, shop Phoenix. Reminded everybody there was about 12,000 people there to see the event, and it's always a great event and lots of fun. The mayor and I this morning attended the Salt and Verde Rivers Water Fund Summit. As people know, the Verde River continues to diminish in its flow, and I think what was really interesting to me is the fact that we had the northern cities as well as the valley cities all working together to recognize the need for collaboration on how to solve this problem, because it's very complex, as all water issues are, but it was very cooperative and lots of good input. And then this Friday morning, coming up, is the District 1 breakfast, and I'm going to have Police Chief Jerry Williams there. She's a busy lady getting around to meet all these neighborhoods. And I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Other members of the council? Vice Mayor?
Thank you. First, I want to start off today by recognizing some new faces around the District 8 office. We want to introduce Dominic Braham, who is with us. He's joined us previously working at the Greater Phoenix Urban League, one of District 8's pillar institutions, and has extensive experience in the nonprofit community as well. And we, at the City of Phoenix, participate in Employers of National Service, where we hire AmeriCorps and Peace Corps alums. And Dominic is a Peace Corps alum, having served 2 years in the Dominican Republic, so excited to welcome Dominic. We also have Pooja and Kyle, who are here with us today, helping out in District 8 as well. They are master's students in the School for Science of Healthcare Delivery, and they're going to be doing some research to find innovative solutions to some of the public health challenges in District 8. Pooja will be working on food desert-related issues, and Kyle, air quality. And we are very glad to have them and their assistance as we bring some academic heft to our efforts on those two important issues. It's been a busy week in District 8. We celebrated the grand reopening of the Aya Mini Park in South Phoenix. And thank you to the Parks Department for some great work on that park. And to continue the trend of the police chief being enormously busy, Councilman Nowakowski and I are excited to have her in the Levine area in District 7 tomorrow night, and hope people will join us at Cesar Chavez High School at 5:30 to welcome the chief to the South Side. We're going to be hearing a lot about My Brother's Keeper later today, and we are looking forward to Thursday, when our MBK team, along with our partners at CPLC and Starbucks, will be hosting a hiring event at the Starbucks on 7th Avenue in Camelback in our neighboring District 4. So that'll be another great event continuing our city's efforts in this area. And then I join my colleagues in looking forward to Thanksgiving and shopping Phoenix. Councilman Nowakowski and I are also excited to have our annual event with McDonald's at Central and Southern, and thanks to Julian Nabozny for welcoming folks and helping us host that great event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Councilman Ciccio, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Glad to have everyone back here. A couple quick things. One, I would like to do an introduction, if I could, to Nick Capolini. He's the new staffer. Why don't you stand up, Nick, in our office. Nick, thank you for doing the work that you do. Just for those individuals that are going to be calling my office, which we get about, I think we're averaging about 106 calls a day now in our office. But, and it's probably unusual that people will find this. He graduated from the University of Arizona. Hate to say it, it's hard to come out of my mouth here, but he's a U of A graduate. He wants to go to law school in the future. He's doing an exemplary job in the office, just doing amazing work. He's 23 years old, lived in the city of Phoenix his entire life. When I came when I came to Arizona, I was 6 years old. And that was, I think there were only maybe 300,000 people in the entire valley at the time when I first moved over here. But no, I want to give Nick a lot of congratulations. It is pretty funny because I'm not going to talk about the election coverage or anything else like that, but I am watching what's going on across the country with a lot of these kids that are in school, these youth that are in school. And for those of you that know, I like social media. There's just so much material out there right now. It's amazing. I mean, where you have college students that are not being prepared for this new world about what they're about to come into. They have to have puppies for comforting because of what happened with the election. They need counseling sessions. I mean, my gosh, I don't know what's happening in our country here where we have a university systems where they have to present these kinds of things. Nick, that never had to happen to you, did it? You didn't have to go through counseling or anything else like that because somebody lost an election. You weren't even prevented from going to school or class, right? So let's see. Oh, And then we have a big event happening with Zoo Lights. Councilman Nowakowski and I went to a great event last week at it. The kickoff for the Zoo Lights. Please go to this. It is amazing. It's something for your entire family, all the kids, your family members. It's one of the most spectacular events that I've seen this year, don't you think, Councilman? It's amazing the amount of lights that they put out there now. And it's a great fundraiser for the zoo. They need to have that. They need to make sure that they're able to take care of their grounds. And this is one way that you can actually bring in your families and kids and at night walk around, have hot chocolate, which we did. And that was a lot of fun too. And I think that, the last point, more of a cautionary note. Several years ago, myself and members of the council up here, we worked on the solicitation ordinance. Now, what does that relate to good weather? Great weather brings along great opportunities to open up our windows, which I do on a pretty regular basis. But with that also comes the opportunity for individuals to find an opportunity inside your home to break in. So please be very safe when you open up your windows. Try not to leave your home unattended with your windows open. But on the other side of it too, with the solicitation ordinance, we had a situation like this happen in my district, parts of my district. The individuals coming door to door now, they're not the kids down the street anymore. They're professionals at what they do. And as a general rule, the individuals coming door to door are out there to scam you. And that's just what they're doing. And so my recommendation, we've talked to the police department, they've done this before, is if someone comes to your door and you make the decision to open your door and talk to them, the first question you need to ask yourself is, do you have an identification? A proper, valid identification. If they do not, call the police department, because they are required by law, by ordinance in the city of Phoenix to carry proper identification at the city of Phoenix. They need to do that. I know you're shaking your head, you better, but that's the law and that's what we're gonna do here. So the other part of it deals with my recommendation to Sal's, you always let people know that you're home. You don't have to answer the door, but just to let them know that you're home. You can say, no, thank you, we don't want anything. That alerts them of the fact as well that there is somebody there. And you know, a lot of these are crimes of opportunity, which means that they're going to find somebody that's not home to break into. So my recommendation is just don't answer the door, but do let them know that you're home. Make sure that your windows are closed because the weather is so nice out. And especially when we're hitting 70-degree weather during the day. It's about 55 now at night. It's fantastic weather. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman DeCiccio. Councilman Nowakowski, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This past Sunday, the Roosevelt neighborhood had their home tour. I just really want to thank all those individuals that opened up their homes and allowed people to walk through and see the historic homes that we have in downtown Phoenix. So once again, thank you and congratulations to the Roosevelt Neighborhood Association for another great home tour. Also this Friday at 6 o'clock at University Park, that's right there on 10th Avenue and Van Buren, we're having a movie in the park in District 7. It's free for the whole family. Come on down. We're going to be Finding Dora. So if you want to come watch a movie out in the park with your neighbors, and if you happen to live in downtown Phoenix, it's at University Park on 10th Avenue and Van Buren. I also want to thank all those individuals that participated in the 15th annual soccer tournament, Copa Food City. Turned out great. We had over 30,000 people a day. It was just amazing, and all the young people that were out there and all the free uniforms that Food City gives out to the neighborhoods and the kids. Thank you so much for your support and for having this event for 15 years. Also, I just want to thank everybody out there in the Maryville area, especially the Estrella Mountain Maryville precinct, for their continuous help on our campaign that we started, See Something, Say Something. I really believe that this campaign that we spread out through the elementary schools, high schools, community centers, and neighborhoods, that we really educated people if they see something going on wrong, if you see an individual driving through that neighborhood that shouldn't be there, that you need to call the police and say something about it. And I believe that this is a detour that the serial killer has stopped. And it's because of individuals like yourselves that care about your community, that care about taking care of your neighborhood and taking it back, that we were able to stop this. And we need to continue this campaign to making sure that these bad individuals don't come into our neighborhoods and destroy it. So once again, thank you for all those individuals that care about their communities and that they see something out there, that they pick up the phone and they call it in. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Also, Mayor.
Councilman, please.
It's so important to shop Phoenix, and this weekend I was actually at Costco, and I can tell you that, I'm a witness, that our mayor does shop Phoenix. He was there at Costco shopping with his son.
Thank you very much, Councilman. It was good to bump into you, and we should shop Phoenix and shop local as well, but Costco once in a while too. Councilman Pastor.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Jack Kaiser from Canyon Corridor and Christown for sponsoring a Movies in the Park. Also attended or was part of the Canyon Corridor Gain event at Salito Park this past Saturday. Midtown, I'm thinking of school. Midtown Living Tour happened 2 Saturdays ago, and I'm especially proud to speak about Dream U.S. Scholarship today. That opened up, and that opened up it's a national scholarship fund for dreamers, created to help immigrant youth who receive DACA status to achieve their American dream through the completion of college education. That is opened. It started today, and it will close March 8th. Phoenix Union High School District will be offering information sessions at Carl Hayden this Saturday on November 19th at 10 a.m. and at North on December 8th at 6 p.m. So those that are interested and need help, there is assistance. This Saturday, we will be starting, or actually not this Saturday, tomorrow, Barbershops Books event, Roy's Barbershop on 3334 North 19th Avenue. We will be unveiling the little library in a barbershop, along with our partners at Habitat for Humanity. Kids from the Hurd Elementary will be there, and we will be giving out library cards, promoting family literacy through MBK, through the MBK initiative. We will also be unveiling the mobile recreation unit. It's been long and waited. I know other areas had been wanting to use the mobile unit, but the unveiling is tomorrow, and it'll be at Coronado Park at 4:30, and hope you can be there. Strength of our Youth Service Project is this Saturday, November 19th at Maryvale Church, 3201 North 52nd Avenue. It's from 7 a.m. to noon. Come join the 500 volunteers who will be surrounding community and paint 25 houses in 4 hours. And then we'll be back at the church to have lunch. Community coffee with Mayor Stanton and I, hosted at Cartwright School District, 5220 West Indian School. That is November 29th on Tuesday. Come chat with us and let's hear all your great ideas. T2050 Street Overlay event will also be happening November 29th at the Isaac School District Business Center at 4135 West Thomas. It's open to the public. All members of the council are invited. Please come and celebrate the T2050 projects. The Second World Bazaar and Community Market is Saturday, December the 3rd, 19th Avenue in Camelback. Please come celebrate our local, shop local, so come local, come in and shop. It's right before Christmas, and so you can get many of the gifts. And of course, our APS annual electric light parade is December 3rd. We will all be there, I hope. And come visit us at 6 p.m. FQ Stories Home Tour and Marketplace is Sunday, December 4th at 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. This is a great way to see some of our historic homes and get some ideas for your home within your community. I also like to say that I think sometimes when you are in certain situations and you have anxieties and you have thoughts and also have the ability to reach out for comfort and therapy, I think our community and our United States is in an influx right now, and right now what needs to happen is really healing and coming together. So those of you that need therapy, please seek it.
All right, thank you very much, Councilwoman Pastor. Any other final comments? I just wanted to make sure that I think I speak on behalf of everyone up here on the dais. Last week, we lost a great Arizona leader, Reverend Paul Eppinger, who was the leader of the Arizona Interfaith movement, who did so much when we needed to fight for a holiday recognizing the great Dr. Martin Luther King. He was one of the leaders of that movement. He turned that organizing effort into the Arizona Ecumenical Council that later became the Arizona Interfaith Movement, whose whole idea was that we stop stereotyping each other. Instead, let's get together, break bread together, work closely together, people of all different religions and backgrounds, et cetera. The closer we can bring people of all diversity together, the better off we are as a state. He left just a great impact. We all worked with him in various projects in various ways. A truly impactful community leader died last week on Thursday, and I just want to make sure that we recognize him and tell his family that we're thinking of them and praying for them, and that Dr. Reverend Paul Eppinger left a great, great legacy here in the state of Arizona and the Arizona Interfaith Movement. We all owe it to Dr. Eppinger to make sure we keep the Arizona Interfaith Movement going strong in our state. With that, I'll turn it over to the Vice Mayor and see if there is a call for executive session.
Mayor, in accordance with the properly posted notice and agenda, I move that the City Council, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 38-431.02A, meet in executive session on Tuesday, December 13th, 2016, at 1 p.m. in the East Conference Room, 12th floor of Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona.
We have motion. Is there a second? There is a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. My understanding is there is no consent agenda today. I'll now turn it to our city manager. But first, I believe that Councilman Valenzuela is on the phone. I'll make sure that the viewing public understands that Councilman Valenzuela is not physically here, but he's participating in our meeting via telephone. Councilman Valenzuela, you're there?
Yes, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Mr. City Manager, are there any reports or budget updates?
No, Mayor, this month, no, but at the next policy meeting, we will have our first budget update of the season.
Thanks for the warning. All right, next on the agenda is item number 2, which is a discussion of our municipal court fair justice program. So Karen Peters and our chief presiding judge are coming forward. When this council made the decision to hire Judge Taylor, I think a lot of people up here brought up the issue about fairness in the fine system and whether we're really, number one, doing justice, and whether we could have an improved system that would result in actually more revenue to the system if we were smarter about how we went about the fine system. Issues of criminal justice reform are huge around the United States of America, but it's not just through the more traditional court system. Municipal courts need to look in the mirror and say, how can we do better? And so I think Judge Taylor took the challenge incredibly seriously and now has some very good information to report. Before I turn it over to them, I'll turn to any member of the council to see if they have any other opening comments before we hear from Karen and Judge Taylor about the success of the Fair Justice Program. All right, Karen. Ms. Peters.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Karen Peters, Deputy City Manager and Liaison to the Phoenix Municipal Court. Today, Chief Presiding Judge Don Taylor will be presenting information about court-ordered fines and fees. As the Mayor said, a subject of concern and discussion for this Mayor and Council, a subject that leaders across the country are examining for reform. The impact of fines varies greatly among people because of their different income levels. While everyone should face consequences for violating the law, criminal fines and civil penalties should not themselves contribute to impoverishment by imposing excessive amounts or unduly restricting a person's ability to be gainfully employed. I'm happy to say that Phoenix Municipal Court is a leader in addressing this issue. Chief Presiding Judge Taylor is with us to talk about the court's innovative compliance assistance program.
Your Honor, good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor, members of the council, good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk to you about what I think is one of the most exciting things the municipal court has done in a long time. You know, it was almost 18 months ago that I came in front of this body and you gave me the great honor of asking me to lead the municipal court. In that conversation that we had that day, there were several concerns that I heard from you, and that I heard from you loud and clear. And I want to tell you we're working on all of them, but one of them specifically was really fundamental to our operations, and I want to talk about that today. That concern I heard from you was that you wanted there to be some sensitivity on the part of the court, that the court was very well aware of the effect that our enforcement of financial obligations in the form of fines and fees actually has on the lives of the people who come in front of the court, and making sure that we're sensitive to that. I love the program that we've put in place. Before we talk about it, I wanted to start with the premiere publicly of a little spot that Channel 11 has helped us put together about the program itself.
The new Compliance Assistance Program at Phoenix Municipal Court is creating relief and new opportunities for those who owe fines to the court.
The Compliance Assistance Program is really an opportunity for people to get back on track. We will put someone at that point on a very sustainable, achievable monthly payment program that will allow them to pay off these tickets over time.
A failure to yield at a left turn, so I got a traffic ticket for it.
Well, part of the problem when you stop paying on a traffic ticket or when you just don't come down to court in the first place is that we're required to notify the Motor Vehicle Division, and the Motor Vehicle Division then suspends your driver's license.
And that means impacting quality of life.
I'm on a fixed income, but I'm allowed to work part-time. I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I did not have a driver's license.
The Supreme Court also weighed in on this program.
One of the top initiatives that the courts are pursuing now throughout the state is the Fair Justice Initiative. As you know, a task force recently came up with some 53 recommendations, and generally they're aimed at making sure that our legal system treats people fairly regardless of their economic circumstances.
You know, thousands of people have in the past owed sometimes significant amounts of money to the court for previous traffic tickets they've gotten. And through various reasons, lots of people had stopped paying those.
It really helped me get my life in order, and it helped me financially get my life together.
The CAP program is really helping me because I have 3 kids and I am on disability, so being able to make low payments every month versus one big lump sum is very helpful.
Lots of people have told us about how excited they are to be able to drive again legally, which permits them to be able to go back and forth to work, back and forth to the other functions, to not be looking over their shoulders, and to be in compliance with the court.
We also think that it's part of our responsibility in the courts to help people meet their legal obligations, not to pose hurdles to their complying with the law. So the CAP program is a good illustration of applying those principles in practice because it allows people whose licenses have been suspended to have their licenses reinstated, to get onto a manageable payment plan, and that's going to help them not only remain law-abiding members of our community, but to maintain their jobs, to keep their families together. And that's just vital to justice in Arizona.
So what's good for the resident is also good for the city. They receive their driver's license back, and the city receives revenue for all the unpaid tickets, and we're talking millions of dollars.
So every dollar that is in fact collected as that down payment and as the monthly payments from these participants is actually money that can go towards the general fund. And every dollar that goes into the general fund is a dollar less that has to be provided by taxpayers at the end of the day.
Thanks to this program, I'm helped.
CAP program is one of the best programs I've ever heard to getting people who are in tough situations out of them.
If you'd like more information on how to enroll in CAP, go to phoenix.gov/court. For Phoenix TV, I'm Deborah Cedillo-Dugan.
So the problem that we faced was that I think the court had in some measure become a victim of its own success over the last 20 years of collecting outstanding funds. We've done a very good job of that, but I think that we had unintentionally over the course of that time created a group of people that we had really put in a difficult situation. Now, Obviously, these were people that began the process by doing something that the law said they shouldn't. So I'm not here to make excuses for that. But what we had, as you could see from some of the individuals that were there in the video, are people who wanted to take care of their obligations. They'd gotten fines, they'd gotten fees, they wanted to take care of it. At some point, they had stopped paying. And when they stopped paying and stopped working with us, that had ultimately gone off to a collection agency. Additional fees had been added. And then it was very difficult for them to come back into compliance with the court. And one of the things that they were suffering from at that point was a suspended driver's license. So when we set out to fix this problem and to try to decide how can we help people in this difficult situation, we really were guided by two aims. And I think they're the two aims that we are always guided by in the court, but specifically in this process. And the first of those, as you can see up there, is accountability. Our job as the court is to fairly and effectively hold people accountable for their actions. And that sometimes entails financial obligations. Sometimes those are mandatory minimum sanctions, sometimes they're not. But financial obligations that put people in difficult situations. It's a lot for them. We set out to make sure that we actually do hold people accountable, and under the terms of the program we put together, it is full compliance. They do, at the end of the day, pay all of what they owe, both to the city of Phoenix and to the state of Arizona. But remember, that was sometimes difficult. So we also recognized that what we wanted to provide was opportunity. And that was the opportunity for people to actually mitigate the negative consequences that they had suffered by finding themselves in this position where they stopped paying on traffic tickets, ended up with a suspended driver's license, and a large amount that they could not afford to come in and pay all at once. So, guided by those twin aims, we said, what can we do? First phase, we were able to put in place almost immediately after I took over. And that was a revamp of the way that we actually deal with people who cannot pay the amount in full on the day that it's owed. And that is a surprisingly large number of people, as you can imagine. If you're talking about $500 or $1,000 or more, that's not something that many people can pull out of their pockets and pay that day. And so we have traditionally put people on payment plans, and we've negotiated those with them. Well, in the past, in fact, ever since 1994, we have been rather stringent about those plans that we would put people on. We decided what it was that you could afford to pay, and we would tell you this is it. Beginning in August of 2015, we tried to mitigate some of those problems by taking a more collaborative approach. We negotiate with people now, and we really say to them, what can you afford to pay? And we want you to be successful. We're all better off, the court, you, society, if you're able to be successful and pay this. So what can you sustainably pay over time? And we tell people that we're going to put you on this plan, these are the terms, but please call us. Get in touch with us if this is going to create a problem, because again, we want you to be successful. So we gave all of our financial officers the ability to make flexible payment arrangements that are very sustainable for people. The second phase took us several months of programming on our case management system in order to be able to do on a large scale. We kicked it off in January of 2016, and this is what we think of as the Compliance Assistance Program. For people in that position that I was talking about earlier, we will calculate a very reasonable down payment amount. It's an amount that we have seen over the years that most people coming into court actually have in their pocket and are available to pay. They don't have the $1,500, but they've got some. So we will calculate a very reasonable down payment. We will put someone on a monthly payment arrangement that is very achievable terms for them, something we know, again, they can sustain. We will at that point reduce significantly, almost completely, the collection costs that were put in place when they initially stopped paying and we shipped it out to a collection agency. And then at that point in time, we will also issue an MVD clearance. We will tell MVD they are in fact in compliance with the court's orders, and they can get the license back immediately if that's the only thing that's holding it back. I know this is a little difficult to see, but I wanted to give you just an example, and I see that it's really not easy to see, but hopefully You can follow along with what you have in front of you. This is a pretty typical case. This is a person who back in 2005 actually got 2 tickets, one for driving without the registration, another one for driving without any insurance, without evidence of financial responsibility. Had responsible findings on those 2 charges, failed to pay, had some collection costs added, ultimately owed, hard to see, but up in the left-hand corner, total owed $2,267. So this is a person who, for the last 11 years, owed $2,200. That was clearly something that was difficult for this person to pay. They didn't over that course of time, and had a suspended license. So under the CAP program, this person, as you can see, we waived 629 of those costs. So those were collection costs that would have been distributed to the collection agency. That would not have been money that came to the city anyway. And the pay today amount you can see on the end there is the down payment amount. This is the reasonable amount that they actually came up with that day. You can see it's $169. And that's actually really close to what our average down payment amount has been, of about $164. So again, pretty achievable terms. The results through yesterday, 9,734 participants. Now, I apologize that all those numbers are up there and the dollar amounts are up there as if they're all equally important. You know, the important part of this in my mind is that's almost 10,000 people who are success stories. That's almost 10,000 people to whom we have given the keys to be able to drive themselves, if you will, out of the situation that they've been in that may have involved a number of those negative consequences. That's almost 10,000 people, none of whom have left the court being unhappy about the amount that they've had to pay us or the opportunity that they've been given to do that. We see that as a real success. And although it was not, and never was the goal of the Compliance Assistance Program to raise revenue, that has been one of the clear byproducts of what we're doing. You know, this was, because we're talking about money that had been uncollectible, some of it for as much as 27 years. I've had people on this program, I've had at least 60 people on this program who owed us this amount of money back from 1989, and many of whom had never paid during that period of time. So this was not money that was going to be coming into the city at any given time. Since January, we've actually collected 4.8. In fact, by tomorrow morning, that will have ticked over to $4.9 million actually collected. There's about another $4.5 million in payment agreements that people, again, on these very sustainable payment plans have agreed to pay us over the course of the next couple of years. 3,175 of those participants have actually taken care of all of it. They have gone through, they set up the plan, and they either paid it off in the course of a couple of months, or we've had several people that were so excited about the program and the fact that they could finally get back in that they've accelerated what they were doing and they've paid it off. We're very excited about it. I think one of the important things, and Ms. Peters alluded to it earlier, is that there is a national conversation right now, and there's a big one going on at the state level and has been this entire year, about fair justice. And what I like to think is not just fair justice, but smart justice in the way that we go forward on these things. I am pleased to say that our particular program was looked at specifically recently by the Arizona Supreme Court's Task Force on Fair Justice for All. And it was actually held up. One of the 65 specific recommendations in the report that was released in August was that all courts in the state consider either Phoenix's Compliance Assistance Program or something very, very close to it. We have had limited jurisdiction courts around the valley that have reached out and gotten information and are kicking off their own programs that actually use the exact same approach that we've been using. It's been very gratifying to watch that take off across the state. It's also been very gratifying to receive a couple of awards. The first award that the program received, or the court received because of the program, was the Always Award, or an award from Always, which is Arizona Legal Women and Youth Services, an organization that does a lot of great work for people that find themselves in difficult circumstances. The second one, and there's an actual photograph of it there, is the Gideon Award. We were awarded this last summer by the Arizona Public Defender Association. And my understanding is that in the long history of that award, which is the premier award that that particular organization gives out each year, it's never before gone to a court. It has now. We were the first recipients. And again, it's quite gratifying to see that people understand what it is that we're trying to do, what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and are also excited about it. I can tell you that this has fundamentally changed the way that the court does business in some aspects. I see it as the future, as the way going forward. It is not just fair justice, it is smart justice, in which I think all the stakeholders are well served as we go forward. I expect that that will be the way that we continue to do business for a long time, and that will set the foundation for other changes that we have in the works, which again try to meet those same aims. I'd like to tell you that's just the beginning. I think it's a good start, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that any member of this body may have.
Thank you very much, Judge Taylor. We appreciate your leadership and listening to the council when we requested these kind of ideas to make our system fair, more efficient, and work better for all involved. With that, I'll turn it over to members of the council, but I'll give you advance warning. One of the questions we have at the end is you mentioned you got other ideas up your sleeve, if you will, and maybe at the end you can give us a little bit of a preview of some of the things that you're thinking about. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Agree with Mayor Stanton. We challenged you to take a hard look at fines and fees, and you have delivered, so thank you, and to the court system for all of your hard work on this important issue. I'm glad we are just getting started. It has been a win from my perspective for both the residents, the court system users, and the taxpayers. And when we can deliver for all groups involved, that's a big deal. And I owe a thank you to Judge Jeffries, who actually helped me understand that this was a problem we could solve. It was something I heard about from constituents who would talk about, my car cost $1,000, it's been impounded, my fines are $2,000, I'm not getting that car back. How is this a win for anyone? But it was hard to see what we could do about it, and Judge Jeffries gave me a great introduction to the court system where I got to see our file cabinet, file room, file hall, where we have file after file of unpaid tickets. That helps no one. And then sitting in and seeing people who were in the court system, particularly there was one young woman who really caught my attention, who just, it seemed like she was in a spiral that she wasn't going to get out of, with more fines and fees on top of each other, and could we take a look at whether it helped anyone to keep filing on when her original infractions were related to being unable to pay for license and registration. So I think we took some common sense here, and just want to thank Judge Jeffries for introducing me to it, and for all of you who've stepped up. We had a lot of early wins. I was a little uncomfortable when we were pushing people to max out credit cards, and we got that done very quickly and then moved on to this important program. I hope that when we hit that 10,000 milestone, this will get more attention. We don't have a marketing budget, and there are still a lot of people who could benefit from this program who don't know about it. So anything that anyone in this room can do to spread the word is very helpful, because it really can change people's lives. If you don't have a driver's license and a job in your neighborhood and you can't get to work, that can be very serious for your economic potential. And our police officers, I think, in talking to them, don't enjoy impounding cars. They would much rather be dealing with the many other serious issues facing our community. When you're taking a single mom's car away, it's not a good day at work for anyone, and so when we can find good solutions, I think it's also a win on the public safety perspective. Judge Taylor and I had a great opportunity to be part of a community legal panel where we talked about this program, and Justice Bales in the Supreme Court talked about really spreading it to other jurisdictions. So I hope we can do more to share what we've done in Phoenix. And then he said that they may be going to the state legislature to talk about more reforms, so I would love to see us partner and support that as well, so that we have all of the tools we need to have the flexibility to address. And we certainly don't want people to get away with things they shouldn't be doing, but if we have common sense solutions that can help people get on their feet while respecting the law, it will create a safer community. So I'm glad we are just getting started, and I want to thank all involved.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Councilman Nowakowski.
First of all, I just want to thank you, Judge, for the hard work and the customer service. That's one of the things that we're hearing from people, is that the process is easy, that there's people there to explain the process, to walk them through. So really want to thank all the individuals that are involved in, just at the counter level, that the service that they provide for the individuals. Can you explain the service charges that the city has on top of each fine? I think that was kind of interesting when you came to our subcommittee, that a lot of times we think that $100 goes back into the city, but there's other service charges, surcharge.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Nowakowski. That's a great question. And one of the things that you have in front of you was not initially part of the CCR, but it is a chart that looks like this. Hopefully all of you have got it in front of you. And I could not find a way to put this up on the PowerPoint slide and have it be readable. So I apologize for that. But I think this is a good indication of part of the problem that we're talking about, or not necessarily part of the problem, but part of what it is that results in people ending up in some of these very difficult situations. This is essentially how a $100 base fine that might be imposed by one of the judges over at the court for an infraction of just about any kind ends up being a minimum of a $252 financial obligation. You can see the breakdown on there. We begin with the fine. We start adding certain things. Oh, fantastic. Somebody is better than I am. We add, for example, a $15 core technology fee. That is part of city code. That's an ordinance that this body put in place many years ago, for which the revenues are dedicated specifically to the court and to its automation, to its use of technology. And that has been a hugely important source of funds for the court. In fact, today, that funds about half of our IT positions. But that does add $15 to the cost of that. The next thing you see are a surcharge on that technology fee, and then an 83% surcharge. It's actually an $83 surcharge, but that's because the state surcharges are 83%, and it's added to both of those. That's where the biggest one of these surcharges comes from. And that actually goes into several different funds at the state level that actually funds just a panoply of different organizations and efforts, again, all dictated by state statute. There is a set of surcharges that are specific in terms of the amount. So regardless of what the base fine is, you have this 83% state surcharge. And then you've got a $13 surcharge that goes to the state level that gets broken up in a couple of different places. Some of that, for example, which actually comes back to local law enforcement, but most of which of that actually goes to others at the county or state level. You can see that there's a $20 probation fee that's added that goes to Maricopa County for funding its adult probation services. You can see that the newest of these is actually a victim's rights surcharge, and that's $2 that gets added on there. But again, goes to the state level to fund some victim's rights programs at the state level. And then there is the $7 fare fee that gets added, again, that goes to the state level, specifically to the Supreme Court to help fund its fines and restitution recovery program. So you can see, particularly given the fact that the biggest surcharge is an 83% one that gets tacked onto whatever the base fine is, you can see that if the fine itself on a base level is $300, $400, $500, these can quickly approach very expensive fines. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Nowakowski, about where these end up.
So basically, if you're watching and you get a fine of $100 in our Phoenix court, then you have to tack on probably another $152, which $117 goes back to the state, and $15 of that goes to the city, and $20 goes to the county. So is there any way for us as a city of Phoenix that we can look at somehow, some way, or even advocate at the state level to remove some of these surcharges? Because it's crazy. It's almost 1.5 times more than what your actual fine is. And this is just $100 we're talking about. Individuals that have fines that are in the thousands, we're talking about thousands of dollars more that's a person that is being charged just with these surcharges.
So, Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Nowakowski, I will tell you that that's a discussion that's being had. I don't think that's an appropriate one for the court to weigh in on. That really is a discussion for the legislative branches to decide what is and is not appropriate in terms of punishment, and how that money that's defined by the punishment should be distributed. So again, not something that I would get involved in, but that is something that is talked about, I think, almost on a yearly basis out at the legislature.
Councilman DeCiccio.
Thank you. It seems like the only surcharge missing here is a baggage handling fee. I got to tell you, it looks like the airlines have learned from government and they've done a good job at it. Let me walk through the numbers if I could, the math. Karen, you and I talked about it earlier today because at the end of the day, it's the math that matters too. So basically when they're walking out and there's a fine, I mean, what they're going to see is a $250 fee, and this is how it's broken down, correct? We talked also about the fact that we have, what, 277 million outstanding, is that correct?
Mayor, Mr. DeCiccio, that's correct. There's about $277 million that we would consider to be non-compliant or delinquent. Those are financial obligations that are not being paid on.
One of the things that this doesn't do, Judge and Karen, is that it doesn't show what the additional amounts are, the additional penalties and all that. Of that 277 million, Karen was going to have all that information here. How much of that 277 million outstanding represents the basically over and above the surcharges and the fee and the fine, the original fine?
Mayor,
or is that included in the 277?
Well, I can tell you a little bit of the breakdown on that 277. Out of that $277 million, there's about $150 million of that represents money that would actually stay at the city in some form. So that would include the default fee, that would include the base fines that are imposed, that would include, for example, money that's owed on incarceration costs that have been imposed on people in criminal cases that, again, we're trying to collect. So again, about 55% of that total 277 million actually represents money that would stay with the city. There's about $3.7 million of that represents restitution.
3.7?
3.7 million it represents restitution owed to victims. And then there's about $123 million that is owed to those various entities I talked about there, whether it's the state
surcharges
or the county, yes, or the Supreme Court.
So of the $150 million that stays with the city, how much of that is, and this is the main question, how much of it is basically over and above whatever that original fine would be? Because that matters, because that gives us an idea of whether or not we're really penalizing people to a large degree or not.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, Mr. DeCiccio, or Councilman DeCiccio, I think I understand the question. I don't have all of that in front of me. I can tell you that out of that 150 million, there is about 15 million of that is the $40 default fee that by ordinance is put on when someone fails to appear or they fail to pay. The other breakdown within that I don't have in front of me, but we can certainly provide that information.
Because we've got that 30% collection fee and all that. Karen was supposed to have that ready. Did you not have it ready? It's a click of a button.
The 277, as I understand it, does not include the collection costs. Those are assessed later.
That is correct.
Oh, so that's, I'd like to have a better picture. I mean, this is a nice rosier picture of the 277, but I'd like to get what the real number is when you include the collection costs, everything. And Judge, I appreciate all you've done. You've done like amazing work on this, but I ask very detailed questions. I want to get the whole picture, not just the part that looks okay that we like. Because when you start including the collection fees, everything else, it could be an additional $150 million on top of that 277. So if we don't know what's in that 277 right now and what the additional amount is, that's kind of the presentations that at least I like to see. I like to see what the total picture looks like, then we can take it from there. And then if I could, when can I get that, Karen?
Well, Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, Judge Taylor has broken down the 277, and I'm happy to provide that to you.
I wanted the whole thing, everything. I want all the information.
Well, the collection costs are not assessed until there's a collection.
Right.
And there's a percentage that goes to the collection agency, and so that's not a part of what.
How much has been assessed of the two, over and above that then? How much has been assessed as to date?
Mayor, Councilman DeCiccio, that's a good question that we can certainly put together. I don't think I have that in front of me today.
Thank you.
I can tell you that when we send something out to a collection agency, there are sizable fees that are tacked on in the form of costs. And so while that's not represented in the $277 million, the amount that will be added onto that exists for collection costs will be somewhere between 30 and 40% of that amount.
Okay, well, I'd like to get whatever the numbers are as of today's date. And then, because I always, and Ed will tell you this, I always ask the questions ahead of time so people, it doesn't put you in a position like we're doing right now, and I don't want to put anybody in an embarrassing position either. Just from my perspective and why I'm appreciative of Councilwoman Gallego, Mayor, and others up here that have taken this on, especially you, Judge, the amount of work you've done on it. Nothing to diminish that. That is amazing work right there for the 9,000 plus individuals. I hope you get your 10,000 really soon. But let me walk you through a story at least, and why I believe that the judge at the Supreme Court Justice Department, or the Supreme Court, and others are taking a look at this. It's a level of fairness that really impacts the lower income individuals the worst. And they get in the cycle that they can never get out of. And I'll give you an example. There was an individual, and we talked about it before, and you weren't here, Judge, because I talked about where we were with it. But a friend of mine from high school struggled, just always struggled, always had the hardest time. His fines, his original fine was just kept getting worse and worse and worse because he couldn't make the payment. And so he worked his way, he literally got on his bike, he got his license taken away from him. But what ends up happening with a lot of individuals that are poor, there are a couple things here, at least give you my perspective on it. Those individuals that are poor, the individuals that have the hardest time, people like myself can pay these fines. I can. I'm financially capable of doing it. A lot of people, they have to make a determination of whether or not they're going to be putting food out, get medicine for themselves, for their family and their kids. As Councilwoman Gallego said, it could be a single mom. I mean, these are individuals that are struggling in our economy, and they're never going to be able to get past it, especially when government becomes the entity that keeps them down. And how they keep them down is by imposing these fines after fines after fines, and then they get into the cycle that they rarely, if ever, can get out of, because they're never going to get their driver's license back. They can never get a job across town, or they can take a bus that takes them 2 hours to get out there. But that impacts their families. It impacts their ability to be able to be a working, back into the working class. So we have an economic reason why, but then we also have a moral reason why. And the moral reason is you just don't want to pile on those people that can't afford it. You don't want to pile on anybody. And then you have a third, which is, I believe, is a constitutional issue, is where your fine so far exceeds really what the penalty should have been. I believe that's unconstitutional. I really believe firmly that you have constitutional issues when your fines exceed so heavily the amount of what is really should have been for that penalty. I get it with the fact that they may not be able to make their payments on time. There are people in our world that just can't and probably will never be able to get that ability to do that. They're just not going to be there. But does government want to be the entity that keeps them down, keeps them from getting that job, keeps them from getting that driver's license to be able to get across there? I just think that it's not. That's why I think that the number that I've been asking for a while now is a critical number, because it tells us what we as a government, we as the city of Phoenix are doing or not doing. So when we look at that $277 million, how much additional is out there in fines on these people that are generally at the lower class, the ones that can barely afford it? And that is where we need to start working on as well. That is the number that we need to focus on. This is important. I got it. Working with the state legislature sounds cool, sounds great. I think we should. But at the end of the day, the things that we can control are the things that we control. And the one that we can control is that fine, that excess amount. So I look forward to it. If you could make sure to flag it, I get a lot of stuff in my office, because you just make sure my office staff gets a copy and says, hey, Sal wants to see this now, I'd appreciate it. But I shouldn't take you more than a day to get that to me. Thank you, Mayor.
Even Councilman DeCiccio, any other comments? I have a few cards from members of the public that wanted to provide information as council or give their thoughts on it. Eric Nielsen, did you wish to provide testimony as council? You have up to 2 minutes to do so, followed by Kurt Mangum, followed by Ms. Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 minutes, so I hope my freedom of speech is interrupted. Lived in Phoenix my whole life. Now I do consulting for the feds and the IOR. It's going great. But what I would like to say about this is let me start. I haven't spoken in front of you guys in a while, but I would like to start with saying is I think one of you guys needs to update your hiring process, because my mother taught me a horse that's never needed blinders is one that hasn't been broken yet. So we all have our own problems, and looking down on someone because they need counseling is actually illegal. That's actually unconstitutional. And on top of that, I can't even see that, but I've been listening to what people have been saying. And what I notice is this man went on record saying that the fee is $252. No, the punishment's $100. The fee's $150 something. I know because I've been to court. Anyway, and the last time I was paying taxes to Phoenix Police, which I love doing, the problem with the form was not what was going on with all this. The problem with the dang form was that there's not enough exemptions. A single mother might be working hard and making $5,000. It looks good, but she's got a direct TV bill. She's got an expensive house to put her kids in. She might have 8 kids. It doesn't really get to the root cause of the problem, which is what are the exemptions? Because everyone's got a phone bill. Everyone's got health care they got to pay nowadays, thanks to Obama. But at the end of the day, the problem is the exemption process. And I'll be here to speak more, but that's all I got to say right now on the record. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nielsen. How about Mr. Kurt Mangum, followed by Ms. Rogers?
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council members, I just want to take a moment to say I wanted to applaud the municipal court and the staff and yourselves just on the leadership. This is out-of-the-box thinking. It's making a difference, tremendous impact. We've had a couple of employees that have benefited from it, and it is outstanding. So I'm just proud as a citizen of the city of Phoenix that we're taking the lead in doing something like this. So I just want to say hats off to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mangum. Ms. Rogers.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, and all in attendance. My name is Greta Rogers. I want to commend new Judge Taylor on the progress that he's made, not just financially, but operationally, to improve the overall conduct of the municipal court. A few years ago, I attended several hearings when an infamous company had come to town, and they're still here, called Fisher Industries. They mine the river for rock. And I learned, because I went to the pay desk, I didn't know them anything, but that a principal of Fisher had gone to the pay desk to arrange for a payment plan. This is a company that has operations today in 14 states. They're headquartered in North Dakota. They needed a payment plan like I need a Bentley. And I hope you will completely cease allowing companies that are financially provident and able to have any payment plan for fine they may have incurred because they were judged guilty. That is absolutely asinine, insane, and unacceptable. And Judge Carrion, I can't remember his whole name, it was this big. He was as soft as a down pillow on this stuff. And that costs every one of us taxpayers, citizens in the city of Phoenix, for that kind of careless inexcusable action. Thank you for your service and for bringing this together. But I have a question. If we have to pay appeals and Superior and Supreme, and they try us, what do we get back? Nothing? That isn't fair either.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers. Appreciate it. Judge Taylor, no other comments? Councilwoman Williams, I apologize, please.
Thank you. Judge, I want to congratulate you. We've seen this at Public Safety, pardon me, and tracked you as you've made progress. I just have a couple questions that if you're fined, you don't pay, is there interest that is tacked on, accumulates? And if so, how much?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Williams, there is not interest. So what happens is the fine amount is set, it's imposed that day, and if it cannot be paid in full that day, state law requires a $20 time payment fee. So we'll add $20 to it. If the person actually complies and over time makes all their payments and pays that off, that's the only thing that's ever added to it. There is no interest that accrues as it goes forward. Now, let me extend that a bit, because what does happen is that if the person does stop paying, say for example it's the civil traffic ticket, then some of these other things kick in. One of them is the $40 default fee by city code. If the person keeps refusing to actually talk to us and we ultimately have to send it off to collections,
right,
then we will take that 30% or so added on, send it off to collections as that amount. It doesn't grow from there. It stays that amount. So there isn't any interest. But again, that goes over as a large amount.
Oh, that I understand. I was just curious that in addition to all of that, if we somehow, they had interest. Of the money you've collected, how much do you have to forward to the state? Any or all?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, out of every dollar that we bring in, it is distributed according to a priority of payment structure that's sent up by the Arizona Supreme Court. It does things like say that restitution gets paid first, and then it goes through a list of who gets paid next, and it comes out proportionally. At the end of the day, in general, I can tell you that every dollar that is collected by the court results in somewhere between 50 and 55% of the money staying with the city in some form, and the other, 40 to 45%, or 45 to 50%, going to the state, either in the form of the county or the Supreme Court or the state itself. It's roughly half and half.
I again want to congratulate you. You have been very inventive, risk-taking, and come up with some very good ideas. I had the privilege of coming over to observe the new mental health court, and I was very impressed on how that worked and how that saves taxpayers money in the long run and saves lives, makes a difference. And I know that that's something that we've talked about for a long time. It's very exciting, and I'm looking forward to your additional ideas that I've had inkling whispers about our potential in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Ms. Barker, I apologize. I missed your card earlier. Up to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Diane Barker in District 6, and I applaud your efforts to help out persons that are in short supply of resources, Judge. That's one of my favorite departments has been the courts, because it's what will the judge, this is what I want the judge to do and why. And it's worked out in helping several people, elderly and low income, in assisting them. I can't collect an attorney's fee. I'm not an attorney, but we were able to win there. Now, what I'd like to say in regards to what Councilman DeCiccio says, I know personally, and also I've seen it, where these fees keep adding up, and it's just a revolving door. And the work programs, at least in Scottsdale, is that they will only designate $7 an hour, very low, a minimum wage. But let's say the average person that is paying a fee earns more than that So you're impacted that way because you're going to have to give more hours for work service. So the whole thing needs to be looked at. Then the other big thing I say to you, in 1988 or 86 when I came here, I didn't bring a car, and I was a Girl Friday, and I always was able to get there by the bus, and Councilwoman Williams, I didn't have a bicycle. But the thing about it is, yes, we need to make the system work faster rather than 2 hours, Councilman DeCiccio, but let's not forget about being multimodal. My dad says it's expensive to support a car for really most people. And there are other alternatives that you can get there. And we've got an expanded bus, we've got rail system and everything. And to think, it's our thinking. We think that everybody needs to go in a single occupancy vehicle because we were brought up that way. Well, the youth doesn't think that way, so let's be open-minded and not put our habits on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barker. Any other comments by members of this council? Councilman Nowakowski.
So, Mayor, maybe in the near future, I'd like to have a breakdown of the 83% on the base of the fee that the state receives. Can we get a report later on to figure out where that money goes at the state level, and also the surcharge of $13 at the state level also, just to figure out if it goes back into preventing crime, helping victims, or where that money's actually going to?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Nowakowski, we can provide the particulars on all of those.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? All right. Excellent report. Judge Taylor, we very much appreciate this very exciting program, which does right by the customers of our court system, does right by justice, and creates a more efficient and fair system. Thank you for your leadership. Next on the agenda is item number 3. Item number 3 will involve 2 related issues, a report update on what City of Phoenix is doing to support our schools in the City of Phoenix, and our new program that's going to be launched, Phoenix Achieves, excuse me. And then secondarily, closely related to that, is an update on our very successful My Brother's Keeper action plan. The Phoenix Achieves program is an action item before this council, so we'll deal with that one first. So Tim Valencia is our education coordinator for the City of Phoenix. Mark Whitfield runs our My Brother's Keeper program. So I'll hand it over to you, Tim, first.
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. Today I'm going to give you a brief foundation as to the importance of implementing city programs and initiatives along specific points on the educational continuum. The Cradle to Career pipeline on the screen indicates key indicators that are clear predictors of student success. The education continuum includes kindergarten readiness, grade level reading, math proficiency, high school completion, and college and career success. Each of you already know the importance and how critical each area is for student success. Our economic future as a city is tied to the success of every student at every stage. So today, I'm really excited to announce our new brand, Phoenix Achieves, for capturing and promoting city initiatives and programs along this educational curriculum or continuum. Phoenix Achieves will be the city's umbrella for all the work we do in education. With this new focus on these student success indicators, Phoenix will ensure students have access to quality programs that prepare students and families for success at every step along this educational pipeline. I wanted to briefly provide some clarification around many initiatives that are in our community that improve educational outcomes along the Cradle to Career pipeline. The first one I want to talk about is Read on Phoenix, which really focuses on birth to 3rd grade. It ensures that every child has the skills and resources necessary to read at or above grade level. The next one I want to talk about in the continuum is Code Phoenix. It's one of our newest areas under math proficiency. This focuses on assisting youth in developing critical thinking, problem solving, and computation skills. On the latter part of the curriculum, the continuum, I want to talk a little bit about opportunities for youth. The city is heavily involved in assisting our disconnected youth who are disengaged from school and employment to get them back in to education. The next initiatives I want to briefly talk about actually span the entire curriculum. The first one is MBK. You'll hear a lot more about it later after this presentation, but it targets and ensures that young people of color have opportunities to overcome barriers to success. The next one the city is heavily involved in is United Way, Thriving Together. It concentrates on every single one of those indicators above, and the city of Phoenix spearheads the kindergarten to grade level reading areas. The last one I want to talk about is Cities of Service. This particular one engages local communities to achieve long-term and measurable outcomes by improving the quality of life for residents. And many of those programs have to do with our education continuum. Now I want to drill down on some of the programs that we offer in each one of those spaces. The first one is our kindergarten readiness. The Youth and Education Office has been instrumental in developing and coordinating many programs in these areas. We work closely with several departments, our library department, community economic development, equal opportunity, the volunteer office, parks and recreation, and of course, mayor and city council. Early childhood programs like these ones up here on the screen, our kindergarten boot camp, brain time, Ready Set Kindergarten, all through our Phoenix libraries. They are high quality and developmentally appropriate programs that better prepare our children and even parents to enter kindergarten ready. And I cannot forget to mention our Head Start program, which really offers services for families and parents from the birth to 5 area. Our grade level reading, as you already know, is critical to the future student success. If students are not reading at grade level, they're 4 times as likely not to graduate from high school. The city offers several programs that improve reading fluency that include our Experience Core tutoring program in our Youth and Education Office, our PAC after school program, tutors in math and reading, and there are several programs in our library department that focus on grade level reading, and our Read on Phoenix program focuses on this particular area. Our next and newest indicator for the city to concentrate on is our math proficiency area. You know, we will, with this particular initiative, we really want to focus and introduce critical mathematical concepts to our students that are fun and engaging. Students who have low proficiency rates in 8th grade will find it very difficult to graduate from high school. The city already operates several programs in our library department under STEAM, such as coding and our robotics programs. We have our Makerspace, our Mach 1 space has numerous programs from literally from pre-K all the way to college. And our Youth and Education Office offered STEAM grants to our schools that provided many needed robotics and different types of items for their STEAM activities.
Mayor, I think as Tim would say, though, this is our newest and probably least developed pillar of the 5.
That is correct. Our next pillar and programs that we offer under Phoenix Achieves. Phoenix programs currently right now target students who need additional support where the traditional school pathway did not work. City programs ensure that students have the necessary skills needed to complete high school and continue on to college and career, and most importantly, self-sufficiency. These programs under this pillar include our Career Online High School at our College Depot, our Reengage Phoenix in our public library, as well as recent unveiling of our re-engagement quality standards. All other programs include our Youth Build program in CED, as well as our Arizona at Work's Youth Workforce Department, also in CED. The last one I want to briefly talk about is our college and career success. We focus on college readiness and degrees, and especially vocational certificates. These programs include, as you guys are already aware, College Depot, our newest partnership with Phoenix Union on our FAFSA Fiestas to increase financial aid applications. Our newest one is Build Our Future, which is in CED that we're looking to launch to increase vocational certificates. And again, Youth Build in Arizona at Work also concentrates on this pillar. But most importantly, I want to sum up that we are excited to launch Phoenix Achieves. We are going to be on Facebook and Twitter. We are actually live right now. We want to provide as much information to our community and all the great work the city does, especially between Cradle and Career. The Youth and Education Office will be in charge of coordinating the social media campaign. So real quick, thank you, Mayor, for allowing us to briefly present our current collaborative around the Education Office and announcing our new brand, Phoenix Achieves.
All right, thank you very much. I do have a card item. I'm going to save it till both items are complete, both the education item and my brother's keeper item. As the city manager mentioned, of the pillars, the one that probably needs the most work is 8th grade math completion. And I think staff is requesting the authorization to do a lot more work in that regard. So I'll hand over to Councilwoman Pastor, who's chair of our education committee here at the City Council, to see if she has a motion related to 8th grade math.
Well, as many of you know, that we, and in the past 5 years, have really looked at our reading and really making students proficient by 3rd grade, and huge efforts within our community came about as to looking at numbers, data, and a number of items. And so we have now have gotten that program up and going with the community and with the help of all our partners. And so now we need to focus at the 8th grade math proficiencies in order to go to the next level and move them in high school into the STEM fields. And so it's very important that we start looking at this. So I would like to move that staff look at replicating the 3rd grade reading program with a similar program for 8th grade math, and that it be brought back to the Parks, Arts, and Education Equality Subcommittee.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any comments on the motion by Councilwoman Pastor? Councilman Williams, please.
Mayor, is there a cost to that? And is there a mechanism for all parts of the city to participate?
That's a
Mayor,
great question.
Mayor, what I would say is this would give us policy direction to develop the answers to just that question, Councilwoman Williams. What would it take to achieve sort of the 3rd grade readiness type of program with an 8th grade math? And yes, it would be, we would show it as a citywide available to all school districts and schools in the city. And we would bring that back with costs and proposals through the subcommittee for council's further discussion.
And it would ultimately come to the council?
It would need to be approved by the entire council in order for us to implement any program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. At least as it relates to our 3rd grade reading program, probably the most comprehensive program is a partnership with Experience Corps, in which we take dedicated volunteers from the community who are willing to put in time in our schools for one-on-one reading, and it's been hugely successful for those students that benefit. We need more people to volunteer so we can take it to a higher level, and my guess is that much of this program would be of a similar vein, in which we ask community volunteers to come in and work one-on-one with students to improve their math skills so they get up to a grade level by the time they graduate 8th grade. But there may be other things as well. Other comments or questions from members of this council on the motion? Councilman Nowakowski, please.
Mayor, you know, I really like to get this data and also get our government relations office to really look at the state level to make sure that we get our fair share with our underperforming schools in the city of Phoenix with after-school programs and all that. It's really a state issue that we should be an advocate in making sure that our schools are the best in the country. Right now, I mean, most of our schools, it's really sad that are failing. And we're on the low end of the totem pole when it comes to throughout the country. And I believe that we as the city of Phoenix need to take some responsibility, but I think we also need to be advocates at the state level to make sure that the state's funding our schools appropriately, and especially our schools that are underperforming in the city of Phoenix. So I'd like to make sure that our government affairs is really pushing some type of policy at the state level to make sure that our schools are equipped with the right resources and the teachers that are going to teach our kids to make sure that they can actually graduate from 8th grade and continue to high school and college.
Okay, I think Councilman Nowakowski raises a good point about whether or not we should report back on proposals at the state legislature, whether or not we will decide to take a position on any of those issues. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about changing state law to make kindergarten a full grade, an optional full day K. I think most of the people in the education community support that as long as it supplements restoration of funding previously as opposed to supplants that. It makes common sense that if we're going to add that additional requirement, you give additional resources above and beyond what was previously taken away during the budget cuts, but we could certainly take a look at that. Obviously, education finance is going to be one of the top issues at the state legislature as they decide whether to put Proposition 301 back on the ballot as a just a reauthorization of the existing 0.6 cents, or whether they go to a full cent and try to bring some real additional resources to our public schools. In addition, ASU just put out a report about funding disparities, particularly as it relates to the Latino community, and said that the way we fund schools in the state of Arizona creates a systemic disadvantage for our Latino students, particularly as it relates to the education after-school tax credit program, because schools in higher poverty areas where there's a higher percentage of minority students, unfortunately, are not able to have the same after-school enrichment programs because so much of it is financed through parental contributions. Some of the wealthier areas are able to provide more after-school enrichment than some of our less wealthy areas, and that creates a systemic disadvantage. That's not fair. That ain't right. And we ought to go to bat for our Phoenix public schools. So, Councilman, I think you raise a great point about education finance and that issue as well. And I think we ought to have our intergovernmental team come back and report more regularly to us on those issues. All right, there's a motion on Councilman Pastor, or there was a motion, Councilman made by Councilman Pastor. There is a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, say again? Well, there's a card on both. So I was going to wait until the end to take the card. Obviously, people can reconsider if we decide to change their vote. I wanted to get the vote out of the way, and I have a 4 o'clock, so I'm going to sneak out here right after this. So there's a motion. There was a second. Again, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That item passes unanimously. Congratulations. Go do work. Look forward to hearing more about the 8th grade math grade level program. Next, we're going to turn to MBK, My Brother's Keeper initiative. The two leaders on that on our council have been Vice Mayor Gallego and Councilman Pastor. I have to leave for a 4 o'clock meeting I'm going to be late for, but I'll hand it over to the Vice Mayor to run the MBK portion of this meeting. Vice Mayor.
Fabulous, thank you. And this will be an exciting one where Phoenix is one of many partners on this. The education community, the business community, the faith community, the nonprofit community have been our wonderful partners. And as I look around the audience, it looks like most of the people in the audience have been our partners on My Brother's Keeper. So if you are involved with My Brother's Keeper, could you stand so we could recognize our great partners? I don't want to foreshadow, but I think some people we might individually recognize as we go forward with the presentation, but unless we have council member introductory comments, we will turn it over to our leader on My Brother's Keeper, Martin Whitfield.
Vice Mayor, members of the council, as a reminder, President Obama implemented My Brother's Keeper in 2014 to provide young men of color and all youth more opportunities to succeed in life. Mayor Stanton signed on to the initiative, and like he mentioned, asked Vice Mayor Gallego and Councilwoman Pastor to lead the efforts. With the assistance of over 100 community members, a local action plan was created and adopted by council in December of 2015. There are 6 key areas to address opportunity gaps faced by youth. Those areas are interschool ready to learn, read on grade level by 3rd grade, graduate from high school, complete post-secondary education and training, all youth are employed, and then finally be safe from violent crime. I would like to take a few minutes to quickly highlight some of our accomplishments from the community this past year. Under Interschool Ready to Learn, we have our Early Head Start Child Care Partnership Grant, which allowed expansion of Head Start services to an additional 188 infants and toddlers. The Kindergarten Boot Camp program at the Burton Barr Library is a free program for parents to help their children prepare for kindergarten. In this program, parents participate in activities with their children such as letter naming, counting, and reading aloud. By the end of 2016, 62 boot camps will have been held in our community, servicing 848 families. I believe the mayor mentioned before he left, under our Read on Grade Level by 3rd grade, we have a successful partnership with AARP Experience Corps, a tutoring program where volunteers who are sometimes retired teachers go into the classroom and provide one-on-one tutoring to the kids. Currently, there are over 200 volunteers in 20 schools serving over 900 kids. As a result, 98% of the students participating in this program have increased their literacy fluency rates. In the Graduate from High School pillar, the City of Phoenix partnered with Phoenix Union High School District, members from the Phoenix Suns and Phoenix Mercury on the Graduation Highway Initiative. This initiative involved teams going door to door to encourage students who hadn't shown up to school for the first 10 days to return to school and receive their high school diploma. In another partnership with Phoenix Union High School District, MBK Phoenix held a Youth Engagement Summit, which was attended by over 250 high school students. They participated in workshops to prepare themselves for college and employment and provided us information on some of the issues they were facing in our community. This resulted in the mayor and council approving an additional $200,000 in our budget to expand youth services. The week before school started, MBK Phoenix provided approximately 1,000 backpacks filled with school supplies to high school students, as well as offered resources for the youth and their parents to connect with valuable community programs. Speaking of valuable programs, our Youth Build program has been in existence for years and continues to impact the lives of youth by connecting them with educational and employment opportunities. This year, Youth Build served 66 youth and completed construction on 2 houses in our community. One of the many students served through our College Depot program is a gentleman by the name of Prince Murray. This young man is from West Africa, became the first student from the Maricopa Community College system to graduate from the Institute on Comparative, Political, and Economic System in Washington, D.C. Prince said he would never have envisioned himself being able to complete this internship without the help of College Depot. Another success story is the Starbucks at 7th Avenue in Camelback, which recently unveiled a new training center dedicated to helping connect opportunity youth. Starbucks also partnered with Arizona State University and will offer full online tuition reimbursement to their employees. The young lady you see on the screen, name is Rihanna, a former disconnected youth who didn't have a job and unfortunately was homeless. Rihanna is now employed with Starbucks and gives back by encouraging others who have had similar experiences. Under the Be Employed pillar, the City of Phoenix provided employment opportunities this past year to approximately 1,500 youth in our community. One of the examples is our partnership with Transdev North America, our local bus operator, which resulted in several hires. One success story is a gentleman by the name of Jamal Carter. Jamal spent the last several years working in the restaurant industry, making less than $10 an hour. Jamal completed the Transdev CDL program and is now making over $15 an hour, has full benefits and many opportunities for advancement. Jamal and his general manager are joining us here today. If you want to raise your hand. Another example is a partnership we had with Goodwill, Greater Phoenix Urban League, and Friendly House on a 2-day employment fair for second chance returning citizens. Now, these are individuals who have been incarcerated or unfortunately have offenses on their records that serve as hurdles to employment. The first day consisted of tips on resume writing, interviewing skills, and learning how to dress for success. The second day was a hiring event with 14 employers, which resulted in 25 hires for this population. Very proud about that. Our police department continues to do a great job engaging youth in our community. 2 examples include the Police Explorers program and a My Brother's Keeper Refugee Youth Safety Forum that was held earlier this year. The Police Explorers program educates youth on police operations so they can gain an understanding of what it's like to work in law enforcement. The program currently has over 50 active members. And the MBK Refugee Youth Safety Forum, which was attended by over 100 individuals, provided resources to the immigrant and refugee population. These resources included understanding rights as a Phoenix citizen, employment opportunities, and where after-school and sports activities are available in the community. Finally, our Police Activities League is another program where officers build relationships through activities in the community, and currently we are participating in activities in every council district. Mayor, I'd like to thank, Vice Mayor, I'd like to thank yourself and Councilwoman Pastor for your commitment and guidance on this initiative. When we accepted the challenge, we knew that there were many organizations in our community that were already doing things in the My Brother's Keeper space. I would like to sincerely thank all of them for their commitment. They have been instrumental in the success of My Brother's Keeper here, and some of those community members are here today, and without them, none of this would be possible. Thank you, and now we'll open up for comments or questions.
Wonderful, thank you. Any council member comments, or shall we take the card? Greta Rogers. And we have only one card on this item, but a lot of partners and a lot of success stories we have not shared, so if anyone is interested in commenting, you can fill out a yellow card and share your part of My Brother's Keeper. And we have great partners who are here, including some of our business partners at the airport, which also did a job fair in partnership with us. So there's a lot happening that we didn't get to cover in today's presentation, but doesn't mean it's not important and meaningful, especially to the young people impacted.
Vice Mayor and members of council and all in attendance. The reason I wanted to speak on this, first of all, I wasn't familiar with the My Brother's Keeper program, so I thank you for the excellent presentation. My concern on the City of Phoenix and education, public education in this state is that we have no jurisdiction and no authorization legally to fund, manage, operate public education. That's a state and a county authorized responsibility. And in the municipalities where the schools are, most of the schools are located, we have school districts and boards who are elected by the electors, registered electors in those districts. And they have the responsibility to operate and manage the school district schools. The funding is by taxation from all of us, and that's perfectly equitable. I have no problem with it. This state, in the last evaluation from the National Education Association, which I heard about 2 months ago, is now at 50 out of 50 states. So we finally achieved the bottom rung of the ladder. Infamous and morally and ethically reprehensible. But we can thank the state legislatures in all the years I've been here, beginning in '73 and prior to that, for this shameful lack of responsible moral obligation to support a quality school system. I want a full report from the City of Phoenix at a council meeting on how much money the City of Phoenix is spending on these various outreach and extended programs on behalf of the kids in the City of Phoenix public schools. And where is that money coming from? Where in the budget is it, and where is it coming from? I want a full report. And I'd like that full report no later than the second meeting in January of 2017. Thank you.
Thank you. Council member comments or questions?
So Greta, those are good comments, and it is the responsibility of the state and the legislature and school districts. However, as the city and our counterparts not really taking an effort or looking at education, I feel it's a moral responsibility, as long as all the city's responsibility, to at least provide collaboration within the community and build collaboration to be able to provide these programs and standards. They're not necessarily standards, but what I mean by that is by participating with My Brother's Keeper, it has been Vice Mayor Councilwoman Gallego and I in our time, also bringing community entities together along with their finances. So just for a broad picture, We work hand in hand with businesses, faith-based and nonprofits to come together to help the situation. So, thank you. We have been working, we have been given this task for over, I think 2 years now, Kate? And so we have been given the task and we have worked fast and furious, and I like to thank Martin because he was basically thrown in and said, these are the following things we need to meet and we need to meet them fast. And thank you for doing that and being able to build that collaboration within the community. This is something that is necessarily and done where it's helping our economic development within the city. We are connecting, we're really connectors. In all reality, we're connectors and we're connecting young people to job fairs so that then they can get the resources that are needed in order to get a job. We are connecting resources to families in order to better their families, in order for their kids to become literate by 3rd grade. We're providing best practices, as I would say, to our community in order for them to thrive and be part of our community, but also thrive within the economic arena, which means a job, and contribute to our community. And so I feel like we do have a responsibility at least to influence education and at least to be able to show it can be done within our parameters. So thank you for your good work.
Well said. We have a card from Greg Torres.
I have my brother's keeper shirt on. Thank you, Vice Mayor and Council. You know, it's an interesting thing. Our family business has been here in the city of Phoenix for over 70 years, and my mother was always and has been engaged, as well as our family, with focusing on youth and education because we believe that's the future. Fundamentally, she had a baseline belief that to do nothing is unacceptable. So when Martin Whitfield called me over a year ago and said, hey, we got this great thing we're going to start, I said, what's it called? He says, My Brother's Keeper Initiative. I said, who thought of that? He said, President Obama. I said, oh, okay. He said that we're going to make a change in our community. I listened to the pillars. I focused on the be employed pillar, but all the pillars are very, very important to our community. I applaud the effort. I applaud the fact that the city has embraced it, gave it to the community. The community has taken up the charge and is trying to make a difference in the world, one child, one day, one moment at a time. And I think our community needs to applaud that. We need to stay focused on that. Because if we're to affect change, it begins with us, it begins today. So I thank you, Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, for all of your efforts in this initiative, and I look forward to continuing this great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Kelly.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here. Vice Mayor Gallego, City Council members. You might remember some time ago, more than 2 years ago, for what appeared to be kind of a routine meeting on My Brother's Keeper initiative, you know, to implement the program through the city. It was a 10-minute meeting, turned out to be about an hour and a half. And there were some community members that indicated that they were concerned about the MBK, and unfortunately they also talked about some racial overtones as it related to the program not being supportive of the community. Well, I stand before you with a number of different hats on. One is a community member. The second is the chair of the District 8 African American Advisory Council. And the third is the chair of the Ellis Center for Education Excellence at the Arizona Community Foundation. I just wanted to share that since 2014 through today, the Community Foundation, Arizona Community Foundation, has supported the My Brother's Keeper initiative to the tune of $1.3 million. And other community organizations, some of which that were here protesting, have had an opportunity to acquire resources relative to the My Brother's Keeper initiative, and not one red cent has come from the city of Phoenix, but it's a dynamic community investment. So I applaud you, Martin, Tim, I applaud you, Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Pastor, and the Mayor for your efforts and initiative to make this program a success.
Wonderful, thank you. And we did get recognition from the White House for the Community Foundation's partnership, as well as the good work generally that we are doing in this community. They said that it's happening all across the country, but they were really impressed with the comprehensive nature that we are starting with early childhood and going through jobs and employment and many programs in between. So we got congratulations from the people at the top, and they did let us know that the president plans to continue his efforts on My Brother's Keeper when he leaves office. So look forward to seeing what happens there. I also think, just in thinking about other things that are happening at the city now, we're working on our workforce plan, and the timing worked out perfectly with many of these programs because we're educating people with job skills, which is what we received a bipartisan challenge from the United States Congress to do as the workforce agency. So the timing is really working out well, because when we started this, we were unfortunately #1 in Opportunity Youth, and thanks to Councilwoman Pastor, Tim, and others, we are not anymore. And that's a real achievement. We still have a long way to go, and there are still a lot of young people who need good opportunities, but we've helped create new schools, from Hope to one of the efforts by Phoenix Union and others. Lots of good stories happening in this community. We can't highlight them all today, but I think it is good that we had a chance to check in and celebrate some of the work we have done so far while thinking about what's next. That is all the cards I have today. Any additional comments from the council? All right, well, thank you for that excellent report. With that, I think we are adjourned.